After we got the boat back from New Jersey, we spent 3 solid days working on getting her cleaned up and ready to get out on the water. We finally got the boat out on one of the coldest, windiest days that we've ever had out here on Watts Bar Lake. Surely one of the coldest and windiest that I've ever experienced out there. We had about 5 miles of open water heading dead into the wind, which was causing these nice 12 to 18 inch rollers to come down the lake, causing a lot of spray. So I tucked down in the companionway for a lot of the trip while we were heading upwind to try to find some calmer areas so I could try to put the sails up and see how she did under sail. It was an experience. It was fun.
All right, so I've got her in the water. I had to figure out a way to step the mast by myself. I had some buddies that were supposed to come up from Atlanta, and they didn't show. So they had their furnace wasn't working. It's about 35 degrees out here today. So, you know, not ideal conditions. And the wind's blowing about 15 knots, gusting up into the 30s. This is by far the most wind I've ever seen out here on Watts Bar Lake, and it's coming from an odd direction. Normally the wind comes from the southwest. Now it's blowing into the southwest, so it's 180 degrees from where it normally comes from. So we've got about 5 miles of fetch heading up the water. So we've got these, you know, 12-inch, 18-inch rollers coming down the lake, white capping down here by the dam. So we're rocking and rolling along. But this boat is solid. I mean, it's just plowing through these big waves, doing good. Big 9.9 horse outboard is pushing us dead into the wind at 5.7 knots. So we're doing good. I'm kind of hiding down in the companionway because I'm getting spray off the deck. And, you know, it's a little chilly. If it was warmer, I wouldn't mind it so much, but I'm kind of hiding down in the companionway. This boat is so much more solid than the little 21-footer. You know, I can even let go of the tiller and come down here and get a beer and that sort of thing, you know, if I wanted to. But we're actually, even with just the bare poles up, we're heeling over a little bit. I mean, that's how much the wind is blowing. So I may not put the sails up, but I might. If I do, I'm only going to put the main up. It's fun.
The local wind readings coming off Watts Bar Nuclear Power Plant were showing sustained winds of 15 to 16 knots all day with gusts up into the 30s. One of the big problems with sailing on a lake is you've got so many trees and peninsulas and inlets that change the direction of the wind so abruptly and causes these crazy gusts to come at you from random directions. So it was a little tricky to even get the sails up to begin with. We finally got the main up and sailed about 5 miles up to a local marina to grab a little lunch. After lunch, things were a little calmer out here on that end of the lake because we were a little closer to the mountains. And then the mountains blocked and kind of stabilized the wind a little bit. So after lunch, I was able to get the jib up. Once I got the jib up, I sailed back out into the main channel. And I was running downwind for a good part of the trip and decided before I got back to the dock and took the sails down, I wanted to turn her upwind and let her stretch her legs a little bit. It was a spirited little ride, and we got heeled over pretty good. This is a 100% jib and a 100% mainsail. I didn't have any reefs in, 13 knots. She handled it great. She heeled over pretty good once or twice, but everything was stable and solid. We actually hit the highest speed of the trip recorded on the Navionics iPad chart was 6.8 knots, and that was actually achieved running downwind, wing on wing. Right here, we're going into the wind about 5.6, 5.7 knots. She was good. She was stable. It was a fun day. I came across the owner's manual for this boat, or at least a portion of it, on a Lancer Owners Group forum on the internet. And it had real basic directions on how to lower the mast, how to raise and lower the mast. Basically, you tie off your main sheet to the end of the boom and your main halyard to the end of the boom. And tighten it down so you've got a good stable triangle formed by the halyard and the boom. You've got to release your rear stays, of course, but then the mast tilts forward and you release it slowly using the main sheet. Turned out it was pretty easy to do. The trick for me, though, since I was actually by myself this day, is the mast is pretty heavy. The mast is 33 feet long, so it's a lot of tension when the mast angle gets real close to the deck. So for me, on my van, I've got a solid platform up there on the roof of the van. It's for carrying rafts and kayaks. So I took an 8-foot step ladder and strapped it down to the roof of the van. That way it keeps the mast up a little bit. I don't know how you would do this with a pickup truck or by yourself in any other vehicle other than the way I have it set up on my van. Because once this angle gets low, it gets heavy. And getting it down is not the hard part. It's getting it started to come up. The system works pretty well. It's a little complicated, a little time consuming, but it works. It took me about an hour to get from the parking lot onto the water with this boat. My little North American Spirit, I could do it in about 30 minutes, about half the time. But it was a good experience to know that it can be done by myself. I can step and go sailing, but it's almost not worth doing if I'm only going to be out there for a few hours. I've got to commit for a whole day in order to make the effort of stepping and lowering the mast worth it. But I got it done. Keep an eye on the channel. More sailing videos to come.